Your life is nothing to be proud of. Don't show up to my wedding. My daughter's voice was ice cold, her eyes burning with contempt I'd never seen before. Something inside my chest cracked, not broke, just cracked. I looked at this person I'd loved more than my own life, standing there like I was nothing more than an embarrassment to be swept away. My throat felt dry, but my voice came out steady. All right, sweetheart, if that's what you want. I walked out of that house a different man than I'd walked in. The drive home was quiet, but my mind wasn't. She'd made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. And she probably wasn't going to like it. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. But if you ask me, the outdoor ceremony could be risky with the weather forecast. I was mid-sentence when I noticed Mark's expression, that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. We'd been discussing Emma's dream of an outdoor ceremony for the past 20 minutes, and I could feel the tension building with each suggestion I made. You know what, Mark? Emma said, completely ignoring my weather concerns and turning to her fiancé. Your mother mentioned having backup tents, right? The white ones with the crystal chandeliers? My heart sank a little. We'd spent hours last month discussing those exact weather concerns, planning contingencies together. Now she was acting like I hadn't even spoken. Exactly, Mark said, shooting me a dismissive glance. Mother always has everything covered. She's handled events for Fortune 500 executives. Fortune 500 executives. Another subtle reminder that I wasn't in their league. For 8 months, Emma and I had planned every detail together. The vintage lace she'd fallen in love with, the flowers that reminded her of her mother's garden, the band that played her childhood favorite song. I'd worked double shifts to afford the premium florist, driven across 3 towns to find the perfect dress, and called in favors to book that band. Every choice had been ours, father and daughter, building her perfect day together. The crystal chandeliers sound beautiful, I said, trying to stay involved in the conversation. But Emma, remember you said you wanted something more intimate, more personal? Mark let out a small laugh. Personal doesn't really work for a guest list of 200. We need something that fits the scale of the event. Well, I said, feeling defensive, I've organized plenty of large events at the Union Hall. Charity fundraisers, retirement parties. The key is Union Hall events. Mark interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. Right, I'm sure that's educational experience. The dismissal was so blatant, so rude that I expected Emma to defend me. Instead, she jumped in to support him. Mark's right, Dad. This is different. This is our wedding, not a community gathering. Community gathering. She said it like it was something dirty, something beneath her. I stared at my daughter, this person I'd raised to be kind and respectful, watching her dismiss everything I'd ever done. Emma, I said, my voice tighter now, these community gatherings taught me how to organize events, how to handle logistics. The skills are the same whether it's 200 union members or 200 wedding guests. Mark leaned forward, his fake politeness finally dropping. Are they, though? Because there's a difference between serving beer and sandwiches to factory workers and hosting a sophisticated wedding reception. That was it. The mask was off completely. I felt my face flush with anger. Excuse me, I said, standing up. Those factory workers are good, honest people, and I'm proud of the work I do for them. Emma immediately stepped between us, but instead of defending me, she turned to Mark with apologetic eyes. He doesn't mean anything by it, she said quickly. Dad, Mark didn't mean to offend you. But Mark very clearly had meant to offend me, and Emma was choosing to protect him instead of standing up for her father. Actually, Emma, Mark said, his voice cool and calculated, maybe we should be honest here. Your father needs to understand that this wedding is about our future, not his past. Emma nodded, and I watched something fundamental shift in her expression. The last trace of my little girl disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Dad, we need to talk, she said, her voice taking on that same cold tone. About your role in all this. My role? I repeated, feeling the ground shift beneath me. Emma, I'm your father. She exchanged a glance with Mark, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't a spontaneous conversation. They'd planned this, rehearsed it, even. That's exactly the problem, Mark said, leaning back with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. You think being her father gives you unlimited authority over our wedding. I turned to Emma, waiting for her to correct him, to remind him that I wasn't trying to control anything. I was trying to help. But she just stood there, nodding along like a puppet. Dad, you have to understand, she began, her voice taking on that patronizing tone people use when they're about to destroy you. Mark and I have been talking, and we think you're too invested in this wedding. Too invested. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Of course I was invested. I'd poured my heart, soul, and bank account into making her dreams come true. Every weekend for 8 months, every conversation, every decision we'd made together. Emma, we planned this wedding together. Every detail, every choice. No, Dad. Her voice was sharp now, cutting. You planned it. You bulldozed over our preferences with your opinions and your stories about how things should be done. I felt the air leave my lungs. Bulldozed? I'd bent over backward to accommodate every wish, every whim. I'd said yes to everything, even when it meant selling my father's watch or working until midnight to afford it. Mark nodded approvingly. Emma's finally seeing the pattern. You use money as control. Dad, oh sorry, can I call you that? You use your financial contributions to guilt trip Emma into accepting your vision instead of ours. My hands were shaking now, but not from hurt, from rage. This privileged little snake was twisting 8 months of love and sacrifice into something ugly, manipulative. That's not true, I said, looking directly at Emma. Sweetheart, you know that's not true. Every choice was yours. The dress, the flowers, the music. I just made sure you could afford what you wanted. What you thought I should want, she corrected, and her voice was ice cold. You never once asked what Mark's family preferred. You never considered that maybe your blue-collar aesthetic wasn't appropriate for our social circle. Blue-collar aesthetic, social circle. These weren't Emma's words. This was Mark's poison, dripping from her lips like she'd swallowed it whole. My aesthetic? I felt something snap inside me. Emma, I took you to look at venues for 3 weeks until you found the perfect one. I drove to 5 different florists because you fell in love with peonies that reminded you of Mom's garden. How is that my aesthetic? Mark stood up, positioning himself protectively beside Emma. See? Right there. You brought up her dead mother to manipulate her emotions. Classic guilt-tripping behavior. The mention of my wife, Emma's mother, as a manipulation tactic hit me like a physical blow. That sacred memory, the reason behind half our wedding choices, reduced to emotional blackmail by this calculating bastard. Don't you dare, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare talk about her mother like that. Dad, stop, Emma said, but there was no warmth in it, no affection, just irritation. This is exactly what Mark means. You make everything about your feelings, your memories, your sacrifices. My sacrifices. The word hung in the air between us like an accusation, as if working 60-hour weeks to pay for her dream wedding was some kind of character flaw. Emma, I said, and I heard the desperation creeping into my voice. What's happened to you? This isn't who you are. She looked at me then with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not even disappointment. Pure contempt. You want to know the truth, Dad? Her voice was steady now, cold as winter steel. Your life is nothing to be proud of. Don't show up to my wedding. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there feeling something fundamental break inside my chest. Not my heart, that was already shattered. Something deeper. The belief that love, sacrifice, and devotion meant something. That being a good father mattered. I looked at this person I'd raised, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt a strange calm settle over me. All right, sweetheart, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. If that's what you want. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling their eyes on my back. Mark probably expected me to slam it, to shout, to make a scene. Instead, I closed it quietly behind me, like I was leaving a library. The drive home was strange. I kept expecting the tears to come, the breakdown, the collapse that should follow having your only child destroy you so completely. Instead, I felt empty, hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just the shell. But as the miles passed, something else began to fill that emptiness. Not grief, something sharper, more focused. Emma had made her choice. She'd chosen Mark's version of reality over 24 years of love. She'd chosen social status over family loyalty. Fine. Let her live with the consequences. I thought about everything I'd done for this wedding. The 60-hour work weeks to afford the venue deposit, $15,000 for the Rosewood Gardens because Emma fell in love with their gazebo. The weekends I'd spent driving to specialty shops for her dress, $3,000 for vintage lace that looked exactly like Mom's in the old wedding photos. The overtime shifts to pay for the band she absolutely had to have, 4,000, because they played the song that reminded her of dancing with me at her cousin's wedding when she was 12. The florist, I'd called in a favor with my friend Tony, whose daughter worked there, got us the premium package for 8,000 instead of 12. The photographer, I'd worked construction on his house last summer, and he'd agreed to shoot the wedding for cost. The catering, Emma's favorite childhood restaurant where I'd taken her every birthday. The owner had given us a special rate because I'd helped rebuild their kitchen after the fire 2 years ago. Every vendor, every contract, every detail of her perfect day ran through my bank account. My connections, my relationships built over decades of being a decent, hardworking man. The same life she'd just told me was nothing to be proud of. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my driveway. A text from Emma, "Dad, I know today was hard, but I hope you understand. This is what's best for everyone." What's best for everyone. Not an apology, not even acknowledgement of the cruelty she'd just shown. Just a patronizing dismissal, like I was a child who needed to understand why the adults had made difficult decisions. I stared at that text for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She wanted me out of her perfect day? She thought my life was nothing to be proud of? Fine. Let's see how proud she is of her wedding when it all comes crashing down. At home, I poured myself a coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The wedding planning folder sat beside me, 8 months of careful documentation. Emma always teased me about my spreadsheets, my meticulous record keeping. "Dad, you track everything like you're running a business." Well, sweetheart, turns out I was. I opened the Excel file labeled Emma's wedding final costs and started going through it line by line. Venue, Rosewood Gardens. Total cost, $18,500. Deposit paid, $5,000. Balance due Thursday, $13,500. My credit card on file. I called them first. "Hi, this is Tom Mitchell. I need to cancel the wedding booking for August 23rd under Emma Mitchell." "Oh no, Mr. Mitchell, is everything all right?" "Change of plans. I understand I'll forfeit the deposit, but I want to cancel the remaining balance." Um, of course, sir. I'll process that immediately. I'm so sorry this didn't work out. $13,500 back in my account. Emma's perfect gazebo ceremony. Gone. Next, catering. Giuseppe's restaurant. Total $12,800. Paid in full last month because Giuseppe had given me the family discount, his way of thanking me for helping rebuild after the fire. I called Giuseppe directly. "Tom, how are the wedding preparations going?" "Actually, Giuseppe, I need to cancel the catering for Emma's wedding." A long pause. "My friend, is everything okay?" "Family issues. Can you refund the payment?" Of course, for you anything. But Tom, are you sure?" "I'm sure." $12,800. The menu Emma had spent 3 weeks perfecting, canceled. Flowers, Bella Vista Florists. $6,200 for the premium package Tony's daughter had arranged. Another favor called in, another relationship leveraged for Emma's happiness. I made the call. "We can cancel, Mr. Mitchell, but the peonies were special ordered from Oregon. The best we can do is a 60% refund." "That's fine." $3,720 back. The flowers that reminded Emma of her mother's garden, the ones Mark had dismissed as rustic, returned to the void. Jake Thompson, $2,800. I'd rebuilt his entire kitchen last summer, and he'd agreed to shoot the wedding at cost as a favor. This call hurt more than the others. "Tom, what's wrong?" "I need to cancel Emma's wedding photography, Jake." "Jesus, what happened?" "She decided her old man's not good enough for her special day." A string of expletives from Jake. "That's bullshit, Tom. You want me to call her and no, just cancel it, please. You know I can't give you the money back. I've already blocked out the whole weekend, turned down other jobs. I understand. Thanks anyway, Jake." That was fine. Jake was a good man who'd been caught in the crossfire. Band the Riverside Boys, $4,500. They played the song Emma and I had danced to at her cousin's wedding, back when I was still someone she could be proud of. This cancellation felt like deleting that memory entirely. Sure thing, Mr. Mitchell, with 2 weeks' notice, we can refund 75% after expenses. $3,375 back. The music for their first dance, silenced. Wedding dress, $3,400 from Elegant Beginnings. Emma had fallen in love with it the moment she put it on. Dad, it looks just like Mom's in the old photos. I'd paid in full that same day, watching her tear up in the mirror. Now I called the boutique. The dress has been altered to the bride's measurements, Mr. Mitchell. Store policy says no returns on altered gowns. I understand. Can I at least pick it up? Of course. It's paid for. I drive over tomorrow and collect it. Maybe I donate it, or maybe I just keep it as a reminder of what love and devotion were worth to my daughter. The smaller vendors came next. Wedding cake, $1,800 from Sweet Dreams Bakery. Canceled, 50% refund. Wedding favors, $800. Emma had insisted on handmade chocolates from a local artisan. Canceled, full refund since they hadn't started production. Transportation, $600 for the vintage Rolls-Royce she'd wanted to arrive in. Canceled, full refund. As I worked through the list, making call after call, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Each cancellation was a weight lifted, a chain broken. For 8 months, every decision had been filtered through one question. Will this make Emma happy? Now, for the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what was right. Running total, $40,895 recovered out of $58,995 spent. My phone started buzzing around 6 p.m. First call from Emma. Dad, what did you do? The venue just called and said our booking was canceled. Her voice was panicked, desperate. Good. I did what you asked, sweetheart. I stepped back from your wedding. That's not what I meant, and you know it. You can't just cancel everything. Actually, I can. My name, my credit cards, my contracts. Turns out my blue-collar life was pretty important after all. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then the text started flooding in. Dad, please call me back. We can fix this. This is insane. You're ruining my wedding over a fight. Mark says you're having some kind of breakdown. We can get you help. And finally, how could you do this to me? I typed back one final message. You did this to yourself, Emma. Enjoy explaining to Mark's family why their Fortune 500 connections are eating McDonald's on your wedding day. Then I blocked her number and poured myself that whiskey. For the first time in months, I actually smiled. The next morning, I was in my garage organizing my tool cabinet. It was something I'd been putting off for months, but now I had time that wasn't being consumed by wedding planning, vendor calls, or working extra shifts to pay for someone else's dreams. The methodical process of sorting wrenches and arranging screwdrivers felt therapeutic, grounding. Each tool had its place, its purpose. Unlike relationships, apparently. I was labeling the small parts drawers when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Multiple doors. I glanced through the garage window and felt my jaw tighten. Emma's silver Honda, and beside it, Mark's black BMW. They'd come together, which meant this was planned. Coordinated. The sound of heels clicking rapidly on concrete told me Emma was practically running to my front door. The measured, confident footsteps behind her belonged to Mark. He was letting her lead the charge while he played the supportive fiancé. Strategic. I continued organizing, waiting. The doorbell rang once, then again immediately. Then a third time, held longer. Emma's patience had always been thin when she didn't get her way. Dad, I know you're home. Your truck is in the driveway. Her voice carried that sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years when she'd scream about unfair curfews and insufficient allowance. Some things never changed. I walked to the front door, taking my time, and opened it. Emma stood there in a designer dress I'd never seen before, probably something Mark had bought her. Her makeup was perfect, but I could see the red rims around her eyes. She'd been crying. Good. Maybe she was finally understanding what consequences felt like. Mark stood slightly behind her, dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as his serious business attire, the kind of suit he wore when he wanted to intimidate people he considered beneath him. His expression was a carefully constructed blend of concern and authority. Emma, I said, my voice level. Mark, Dad, we need to talk. Emma's voice was strained, like she was barely holding herself together. What you did yesterday, it's insane. You can't just destroy my wedding because you're upset about one conversation. One conversation. She was reducing 8 months of manipulation, her cruel words, and her complete rejection of everything I'd sacrificed to one conversation. The audacity was breathtaking. "I'm not upset, sweetheart," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm at peace, for the first time in months, actually." Mark stepped forward, his jaw set. "Mr. Mitchell, I think we need to have an adult conversation about this situation. What you've done isn't just petty, it's destructive. Emma is devastated." Adult conversation. I almost smiled. This from the man who'd spent months poisoning my daughter against me, who'd systematically undermined every relationship I'd built to make her wedding special. Is she devastated about the wedding being canceled, or devastated that she has to explain to your family why their connections will be disappointed? I asked, my tone remaining conversational. Emma's face flushed red. "That's not what this is about, and you know it." "Isn't it?" I stepped aside and gestured for them to come in. "Please, come in. Let's have this adult conversation Mark wants." They exchanged a glance, probably surprised I wasn't slamming the door or shouting. Emma entered first. Mark closed behind her, his hand protectively on her lower back. They sat on my couch, the same couch where Emma and I had spent countless evenings planning her wedding, looking at magazines, dreaming about her perfect day. I took the armchair across from them, settling back comfortably. The silence stretched between us, and I could see Emma getting more agitated with each passing second. She'd expected drama, tears, maybe even an apology. Instead, she was getting calm observation. "So," I said finally, "what exactly did you want to discuss?" "Dad, you have to fix this!" Emma exploded, her composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The venue called me at 7 this morning, panicking because they thought there was some kind of emergency. Giuseppe was so confused, he called 3 times. The florist, Jesus' dad, Tony's daughter was crying when she called. She thought someone had died." I felt a small pang at that last part. Tony's daughter was a sweet girl who'd worked hard to make Emma's floral arrangements perfect. But that wasn't my fault. That was the collateral damage from Emma's choices. "I'm sorry people were upset," I said sincerely. But I was clear in all my conversations that this was a cancellation, not an emergency. Mark leaned forward, his business negotiation mode activated. "Look, I understand you were hurt by what happened yesterday. Emma feels terrible about how things were said." "How things were said," I interrupted, my voice still calm but with an edge now. "That's interesting phrasing, Mark. Very diplomatic." Emma shot Mark a warning look, then turned back to me. "Dad, I was stressed. You know how wedding planning has been. All the pressure, all the decisions. I said things I didn't mean." "Which things didn't you mean, exactly?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That my life is nothing to be proud of? That I shouldn't show up to your wedding? That my blue-collar aesthetic isn't appropriate for your social circle? Which of those statements were just stress talking?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see her struggling, trying to find a way to walk back her words without actually admitting she'd been wrong. Mark jumped in. "She's apologizing, Mr. Mitchell. Isn't that enough? Everyone says things they regret when emotions are running high." "Are you apologizing too, Mark?" I asked, turning my attention to him. "For calling my work experience educational? For dismissing the people I've spent my life helping as just factory workers? For suggesting that mentioning my late wife was emotional manipulation?" His confident expression flickered. He hadn't expected me to throw his own words back at him so precisely. "I think you're taking things out of context." "No, I don't think I am." I stood up, and both of them tensed slightly. "I think I'm finally seeing things in perfect context. For months, you've been filling my daughter's head with poison about me, about my life, about everything I've worked for. And yesterday, it all came out." Emma stood up too, her voice rising. "That's not true. Mark never said anything bad about you." "Really?" I walked to my kitchen counter where I'd left my wedding planning folder and brought it back. "Let me read you something, Emma. This is from your phone call 2 weeks ago." I flipped to a page where I'd taken notes. You said, and I quote, "Mark thinks the Union Hall decorations might look too working class for his family." Your words, Emma, but Mark's thoughts. Her face went pale. She'd forgotten I took notes on everything. "And here," I continued, flipping another page, "last month's conversation, Mark's mother suggested we might want to reconsider the menu because Giuseppe's style is very Ethnic. Again, your words, his mother's opinions. Mark's calm facade was cracking. Those conversations were taken out of context. We were just trying to. To what? I closed the folder and looked directly at him. To erase everything that made this wedding meaningful to Emma and me, to replace it with whatever would impress your parents' business associates? Emma was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration and rage. You're twisting everything. You're making it sound like I don't love you. Do you love me, Emma? The question hung in the air like smoke. Because yesterday, you looked me in the eye and told me my life was nothing to be proud of. You told me not to come to your wedding. If that's love, then I don't understand what the word means anymore. She was sobbing now, her perfect makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks. I was angry. I was overwhelmed. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The pressure of having your wedding paid for? The pressure of having every wish granted? The pressure of having a father who worked himself to exhaustion to make your dreams come true? My voice was rising now, the calm finally cracking. What exactly was so overwhelming about being loved unconditionally? Mark stood up, positioning himself between Emma and me. That's enough. You're being cruel now. I'm being cruel? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. I'm being cruel because I'm pointing out that my daughter told me she was ashamed of me, because I'm refusing to pretend yesterday didn't happen? Dad, please. Emma stepped around Mark, reaching for me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Can't we just fix this and move on? I looked at her outstretched hand, then at her face. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, who trusted me to make everything better. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone who could look at the man who'd given her everything and call his life worthless. Fix this how, Emma? I asked quietly. By pretending you respect me? By acting like yesterday was just a misunderstanding? By going back to planning a wedding where I'm hidden in the back row so your new family doesn't have to be embarrassed by the man who paid for it all? She had no answer. None of them did. The wedding is off, Emma. All of it. And that's not changing. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Emma's desperate attempts to salvage her wedding through the mutual acquaintances who kept me informed, despite my apparent exile from her life. The grapevine in our small town was remarkably efficient, and people talk when a wedding that everyone's been anticipating suddenly implodes. Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop called to ask if I was okay after hearing about the family emergency. Giuseppe's nephew mentioned that Emma had come in crying, begging them to cater a much smaller event for half the original price. Jake called to tell me that Emma had shown up at his studio, offering to pay double if he'd reconsider. I told her no, Tom, Jake said, his voice grim. After what she said to you, after what that little prince of hers did, she's on her own. The most telling detail came from Tony, whose daughter had handled the flowers. She came back 3 times, he told me over beer at Murphy's bar, each time more desperate, first offering to pay full price for whatever flowers they had available, then begging for a payment plan, finally asking if they'd do anything at all, for $200. $200 for flowers that had originally cost $6,000. The mathematics of humiliation calculated in real time. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Emma, dozens of them that I let go to voicemail. The messages started angry, evolved to pleading, and finally settled into a kind of hollow desperation. Dad, please, I know I hurt you, but this is my wedding day. It's supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The Riverdale Community Center is the only place we could book on short notice. It's not what I dreamed of, but maybe that's okay. Maybe simpler is better. Mark's parents are flying in tomorrow. They don't know about what happened. Please don't do this to me in front of them. That last message almost made me laugh. Even now, even in her desperation, it wasn't about reconciling with me. It was about avoiding embarrassment in front of Mark's family. The morning of what should have been her perfect day, I put on my best suit, the one I'd planned to wear to walk her down the aisle, and drove to the Riverdale Community Center. The contrast was stark and immediate. Instead of the manicured gardens of Rosewood, guests were arriving at a squat brick building wedged between a laundromat and a tax preparation office. The parking lot was cracked asphalt with weeds pushing through, and someone had forgotten to clean up the cigarette butts around the entrance. I parked across the street and watched the circus unfold. Mark's parents arrived first, stepping out of a gleaming Mercedes and looking around with barely concealed horror. His father, a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit, said something to his wife that made her clutch her pearls, literally. She was scanning the neighborhood like she expected to be mugged at any moment. The other guests trickled in slowly, and I could read their confusion in their body language. These were people who'd received elegant invitations promising a garden ceremony at Rosewood Gardens, followed by dinner and dancing. Instead, they were walking into what looked like a venue for high school reunions and church bake sales. Emma arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony in a pickup truck driven by her cousin Lisa. Not the vintage Rolls-Royce she dreamed of. Apparently, her backup transportation budget couldn't stretch that far. She climbed out wearing the dress I'd paid for, but something was wrong with it. The hem looked uneven, hastily altered. She must have had to adjust it herself when the seamstress canceled along with everything else. I waited until the ceremony was supposed to start, then walked across the street. The community center's main room had been decorated with what appeared to be grocery store flowers and white streamers that looked like they'd been purchased at a dollar store. Folding chairs were arranged in uneven rows, and I could see gaps where people who'd RSVP'd had simply decided not to show up rather than attend this makeshift affair. Mark stood at the front in a rented tux. I could tell by the way it didn't quite fit his shoulders. Beside him was a man I didn't recognize, probably some friend playing efficient since their original minister had been part of the package deal with the venue I'd canceled. Emma was in the back corner, frantically trying to fix her bouquet. Instead of the elaborate peony arrangements she'd planned, she was holding what looked like a grocery store bundle wrapped in aluminum foil. Her hands were shaking as she tried to make it look presentable. I approached slowly, and I saw the exact moment she noticed me. Her face went through a remarkable transformation: confusion, then hope, then wariness, then something that looked almost like relief. "Dad?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "You came." "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." The hope in her eyes was painful to see. Even now, even after everything, some part of her still believed that her father showing up meant everything would somehow be magically fixed. "Does this mean—" She started, then stopped herself. "Does this mean what, Emma? Does this mean you forgive me? That we can fix this?" I looked around the room, at the wilted flowers, the mismatched decorations, the guests who were clearly wondering if they'd made a wrong turn somewhere. Mark's mother was holding a tissue over her nose like the air itself was offensive. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I said quietly. "A wedding without your father's embarrassing influence?" Her face crumpled. "Dad, please don't do this. Not here. Not now." "Do what? I'm just observing. This is beautiful, Emma. Very authentic." Mark had noticed me now and was making his way over, his jaw set in that way that meant he thought he was about to handle a situation with his superior intellect and breeding. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand like we were meeting at a business conference. "I'm glad you decided to come. I was hoping we could put yesterday behind us." I looked at his outstretched hand but didn't take it. "Yesterday? You mean when your fiancé told me my life was nothing to be proud of? That yesterday?" People around us were starting to notice the tension. The ambient chatter was dying down as guests sensed drama brewing. "Let's not rehash old arguments," Mark said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Today is about celebrating love and new beginnings." "Is it?" I looked around again. "Because it looks to me like today is about the consequences of choices." Emma stepped between us, her voice desperate. "Dad, please, I'm sorry. I've apologized 100 times. What more do you want from me?" What did I want? I thought about that for a moment, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on us. The guests, the wedding party, Mark's horrified parents, they were all waiting to see how this would play out. "I want you to understand something, Emma," I said, my voice carrying across the now silent room. "I want you to understand what respect looks like." I walked to the front of the room where a small podium had been set up for the ceremony. The makeshift officiant stepped aside, clearly sensing that whatever was about to happen was bigger than his role in it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice filling the space, "I'm Tom Mitchell, Emma's father. Most of you know me, and those who don't have probably heard about me in the last 2 weeks." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mark was moving toward me, his face red with anger, but Emma caught his arm. She knew that whatever was about to happen, stopping it would only make things worse. 2 weeks ago, my daughter and I had a conversation about this wedding, about my role in it, about my life, and whether it was something to be proud of. I paused, letting that sink in. She told me that it wasn't. She told me not to show up today. The silence was absolute now. I could see Mark's parents exchanging horrified glances. This was exactly the kind of scene they'd probably feared when they learned their son was marrying beneath his social station. "But here's the thing about fathers," I continued. "We show up anyway, even when we're not wanted, even when we're told our lives are nothing to be proud of. We show up because that's what love looks like." Emma was crying now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. Mark was whispering urgently in her ear, probably telling her to shut this down, but she just stood there, frozen. For 8 months, I poured everything I had into making this day perfect for my daughter. $60,000, countless hours, relationships built over decades, all of it dedicated to her happiness. The venue you're not sitting in today, I paid for it. The flowers that aren't decorating this room, I bought them. The photographer who isn't capturing these memories, I hired him. I gestured around the community center. This is what happens when you decide your father's love isn't good enough. When you choose embarrassment over gratitude. When you let someone else convince you that the man who raised you is somehow beneath you. Mark finally broke free from Emma and strode toward me. "That's enough. You're ruining her wedding day." "No, son," I said, my voice steady and calm. "She ruined it herself 2 weeks ago. I'm just here to witness the consequences." "You're a bitter old man who can't accept that his daughter has grown up and moved on." The words hung in the air like a challenge. I looked at this young man who'd spent months systematically destroying my relationship with my daughter, who'd poisoned her against everything I'd worked for, who'd convinced her that my love was somehow a form of control. "You're right about one thing, Mark," I said. "She has moved on. She's moved on from gratitude, from respect, from basic human decency, and you helped her get there." Emma finally found her voice. "Dad, stop, please. You're humiliating me." "I'm humiliating you?" I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "Emma, look around this room. Look at your guests trying to figure out what went wrong. Look at your future in-laws planning their escape route. Look at yourself, standing in a community center in a dress that doesn't fit, holding flowers from a gas station, begging the man whose life is nothing to be proud of to stop telling the truth." The truth of those words hit her like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward, her face pale with shock. "This didn't have to happen," I continued, my voice softer now but still carrying to every corner of the room. "All you had to do was treat your father with respect. All you had to do was remember that the man who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who loved you unconditionally, deserved better than to be dismissed like hired help." I stepped down from the podium and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted in front of me like I was carrying something contagious. At the door, I turned back one last time. Emma was sobbing openly now, her perfect wedding day dissolved into chaos and recrimination. Mark was trying to salvage the situation, but his parents were already heading for the door. Half the guests were checking their phones, probably calling rides. "Congratulations on your wedding, Emma," I said. "I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be." As I walked to my car, I could hear the sounds of the celebration falling apart behind me. Raised voices, crying, the scrape of folding chairs as people decided they'd seen enough. I drove home in perfect silence, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete and total peace. As I drove home from that community center, something settled deep in my chest. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but a profound sense of completion. For months, I'd been living in confusion, wondering why my relationship with Emma felt so wrong. Now I understood. It wasn't me. It had never been me. The next few weeks brought consequences I watched with detached interest. Mark's parents flew home immediately, and word spread through their social circles about the embarrassing scene. Mark grew cold and distant, blaming Emma for the humiliation. Their marriage lasted 4 months before he filed for divorce. Emma called dozens of times, each message more desperate than the last. But I'd learned something important. Some wounds are meant to teach, not heal quickly. Some consequences need to be felt fully before real growth can happen. The people in our town understood. Giuseppe stopped by with wine and a simple message. You did the right thing, my friend. Sometimes love means letting people face the truth of their choices. That's the lesson from this story. Love isn't unconditional acceptance of cruelty. Respect isn't optional in healthy relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone's worst behavior, even when that someone is your own child.